Welcome, everyone. And so I just had a few technical issues, but we're back. We're here. And of course, like I promised, every 9 days or so, we'll be having an incredible episode and lectures geared towards anything actual facts, anything that has to do with us, anything that has to do with us as a people, anything that has to do with our salvation, has to do with our freedom, our liberty. Like today is, I really didn't know where to start with this topic. As you can see, the topic is identity crisis. So we're going to address the topics that have been coming up in the diaspora with the who are we? You know, you have the Moors, you have the Hebrews, you have so many different so-called organizations and people who are trying to pull you in different directions, speaking about sovereignty, speaking about nationality. They have these so-called solutions to our liberation. And I'm here to tell you today, right, that first and foremost, as we all start, if you're familiar with our other episodes, we always give gratitude and thanks to our Heavenly Father in flesh, who we affectionately know as His Excellency, Dr. Malachi Z.K. York Panabab Yanun. And for those that are familiar with him, then just stay strapped in, because the affirmation that he has, I'm going to tell you a lot of affirmation that he has given us as it relates to nationhood, as it relates to your salvation, as it relates to liberation, as it relates to sovereignty. And your nation, your nation, everyone listening, you have a literal nation that you are a part of that you may not be aware of, because the devil done such a good job in trying to blind you with this case against our president, our father, our chief, Dr. Malachi York, President York, President Dr. Malachi, Chief Black Eagle, some refer to him as. The Indigenous Native Americans refer to him as Chief Black Thunderbird Eagle. And we'll cover all of that in this lecture. Obviously, it's going to be a part 2. So, because it's a lot to cover. So I want you, just as a let's say, disclaimer, right? I don't want anyone, because this is what's going to happen. I'm just giving you heads up. What's going to happen is this. The moment I introduce this information that our Father has given us, you're going to find a lot of people in the conscious community that are going to try to run with this and create content. So I want to bear witness that this is the first time you're going to hear anything as it relates to this particular topic. You're not going to hear it on any other channels. You're not going to hear it on any other podcast. We literally waited for everyone to run out of the things they had to say, right? They ran out of things to say. They have the knowledge that they're trying to teach or talk right now or give content on their channels or whatever is not keeping your attention, because they're informed. What that mean? What does informed mean? It means that they're in a particular form that they can't get out of. They can't go outside of the doctrines that's been laid in front of them by the Caucasoid, by the Asians, by any particular authority on the planet. Our people are stuck within the confines of those books and those texts. So they don't have anything new. So you're not going to hear anything new. What you will hear new on this, everything on this podcast, you're going to hear new. And no one is going to ever tell you this unless they regurgitate what you hear from Dr. Malachi Z.K. York, which they've been doing already. But we waited for the perfect time to make sure, it's the perfect time to make sure that we get this information to you in the best way. And we're going to cover international law. That's the first thing. There's no one in the so-called conscious community, so-called scholastic community, so-called liberating community. There's nationals and people more specifically. I had a big conversation with a few of the Moors. I've addressed them several times, and they know they can't deal with the doctrine that our Father has laid out as it relates to our nation and as the Nubian nation, as it relates to your freedom and your liberation. And this has to be done now because time is running out. Okay. So just, if you can share, just share right now, please share, subscribe, put on your notifications, just as a reminder. So people, sometimes you forget that this lecture is on. and or the lectures are coming, and so you want to be notified of these things. Yeah, okay. So some questions are coming in. If you leave the questions in, I'll get to them eventually. A lot of people have asked a lot of questions on the, obviously, in the comments. It's been a lot of exchanges, which is good. So one thing I want to address. This is going to be a two-part. So initially, we're going to address the occupation of the Americas. Who occupied the Americas first? Who were the first who are the indigenous tribes of the Americas? Are Africans in America related to native indigenous people? Are you Native Americans? Are you Indians? There's a lot of questions that comes up, and people are quite confused because some say, well, I'm not African, I'm indigenous. And then they claim specific tribes in the Northeast area, the 500 tribes of the Americas. They claim Cherokee, they claim Chickasaw, they claim Choctaw, they claim Seminole, they claim Algonquin, they claim just many tribes, the Seminole, the Fox tribes, all out in the West. You have the Crow tribes, you have the Utes, many different tribes. There's literally hundreds of tribes of these Native American so-called, or American Indians, which they are now because of the mixing. And when you see that, it's just quite confusing, because then you have the Moors, right? The Moors, and this is specifically directed to them because we've had enough of them and their games, playing with our people's souls and playing with our people's identity by claiming to be, oh, you are Moors, you are, we have a nation. America was the Moorish Empire, and we have treaties with the U.S. The Moors do not have treaties with the U.S., okay? If they use that as a particular talking point to try to make it appear as though that they have some type of diplomatic relations with the United States, they don't. They have one treaty that, the Moroccan government in Northwest Africa has a treaty, several treaties with the U.S., but the one that they often make reference to is the Treaty of Friendship and Peace, right? And that's a government to government treaty. It's not something that a group of Negroes who claim not to be Muslim, but they say Muslim, who claim not to be Islamic, but they use Islamic terms and can confuse people by saying, well, we're part Muslim, but we're not really Muslim. We're Muslim sons. We're students of Noble Drew Ali. And they try to initiate this sovereignty claim and have people send in money for their sovereignty and send in money for nationality. And it's just a hustle, because there's a criteria for nationhood that's in international law. And the reason I know this is because our president, our father, made myself responsible for studying international law and studying the various areas, the framework of international law, the framework of laws that govern states, that governs nations, the framework of the jurisprudence of the International Court had to be studied for cases, the layout of the United Nations, the particular articles that makes reference to us as a nation. All of that had to be studied over the last 15 years. Before I even spoke on this, I had to do my homework. So what I'm bringing to you now is the homework that was done and the expertise that was done in order to protect the real nation, the Nubian nation, the Nuwaupian nation that we built, and it was born out of natural nature in a specific area that they call Georgia today. And we're going to get into the land claims and our claims to the land in Edenton, which is in Putnam County, right near 404 Shady Dell Road. The claims will we rightfully own today, right? A lot of people don't think. I'll let you know how you as a people actually own Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. I have empirical proof. I have the documents in front of me, and I'm going to go through it, and it's going to take some time. So obviously, you know, for our lectures, they're like 3 hours long, and people listen to them, which is great because we have information that no one has heard. Again, I'm emphasizing that because when you hear it again, when someone else like these Tariq El Bays and these Moorish guys that claim to have this sovereignty figured out, they don't. They don't, because I listened for 10, 15 years to make sure that when I open my mouth on the behalf of our nation, the only true nation, Black nation, coming out of what you call the wilderness of North America, because there's a criteria for nationhood that has to be established and it should be recognized. And the criteria is very specific. It's not something that you just come off the top of your head with. It's literally a framework of freedom that all nations that came from up under colonialism was responsible for taking. And you can go through all the African nations, 1960, most of them were colonized, and there's a specific criteria for colonization for people who've been colonized by a foreign government coming to a foreign land and subjecting the people to what you call foreign rule. And they declared independence and then nationhood. How was it done? By a specific international law criteria that I'm going to teach you, that the Father taught us, his government, in order to inform you, so that when it's time for you to take a stand, you'll be well educated or well versed in this international law, so you can be clear and you can talk to anybody across the scope that comes to you with this jargon of send the paperwork in, go to their domestic courts. First of all, you don't go to U.S. courts for sovereignty. That's first and foremost. That's not something that's done. You don't go to a local court. The moment you walk in a local court, right, and this is for these Moorish and the Hebrew Israelites, I'm going to address them too, because they're not going to be able to deal, So they're not. You're not going to get our people involved with the Hebrew nation or nation of Hebrews when the Hebrews didn't have a nation. There's no lands that you claim, no lands in the Old Testament that the Hebrews so-called had. That's why you were wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. If you really want to be technical, you were in Egypt, so-called allegedly, right? No proof of that. You were known as the Hyksos, right? Or the shepherd kings in Egypt. But let's say you were in Egypt, you mixed them for 40 years, you come out 60,000 so-called strong, and you're looking for a land because you don't have a land. You never had a land. In order to be a nation, you have to have a land. And you have to show that the land is yours indigenously, meaning that you had indigenous roots there from the beginning. So we're going to cover that. And this is the method. I want to tell you the reason why. This is the real reason why they arrested or kidnapped our president, which is a violation of international law. And you all are going to free him. Trust me. When you hear this information, you'll know, oh, you see the big picture. Because the way that he had to come and assist, right, you all and free you all was quite different from other nations. Mind you, other nations did get colonized. And please share, because it's about to get real heated in here. And I'm about to cut off some heads with these facts. And it's just time to do it because our people have been misled and you all are tired. I'm tired of it. My father's tired of it. And it has to be done away with because it's a new day and time. So when nations are colonized, let me address that. Colonized nations are typically how most nations were subjugated to foreign rule, meaning that colonialism is when a colony of foreigners from a specific European country or let's say the Holy See, the Roman Catholic so-called ecclesiastic government through their Pope issued specific papal bulls, right, to the so-called claims of authority to the domains of the planet because they were looked at as the vicar of Christ. The Pope was in their ecclesiastic government. He was the head of the Catholic Church, and he had some so-called claims of authority as the incarnation, not incarnation, but let's say representative of Christ on the planet. Therefore, he ruled the planet Earth, and this gave him authority, so-called, to go to other countries and issue these papal bulls and allow conquistadors from Spain and Rome and other places to come into lands and colonize them, so-called civilize them in the way of Christianity in order for them to come out of claims of uncivilized behavior or behind times, which they claim to why they had to come into these lands. It's specifically Africa, and I'll address Africa. Now, the Europeans followed suit, right? They came in, they obviously Belgium, Belgium did the Congo. You had Britain who colonized Nigeria, colonized Ghana, Gambia. You had the French who colonized Algeria, Tunisia, Guinea-Bissau, Mali. You had all types of foreigners. The Spanish came in, Portugal came in and colonized Angola. And this colonization happened at when they scrambled for Africa in the 1800s. Now, colonialism just ravished the continent and even South America. And the U.S. Let me say this: the Americas were colonized too now, so I want you to keep that in mind. Colonialism, because this is your ticket to freedom. This is your avenue to freedom. No one is going to tell you this. So this is the first time you hear it on an Actual Facts podcast. Now, what happens is colonialism became illegal in 1960. The framework of colonialism, or the definition of it, is that when a foreign nation comes in visiting, they're literally visitors to a land, and they establish their foreign government. Maybe in a specific council, they may set up precincts where they have their police officers that govern or implement the law. Then they have their council members or their so-called hierarchy that has loyalty to the crowns of these particular European empires. Let's say the Queen of Britain, right? Elizabeth, she passed, I think, a few years ago, right? So Ghana, let's speak Ghana because I'm home in my country, Ghana. So I can speak about Ghana specifically because it's one of the first countries that voted their president into office, right? Because of the effects of colonialism, they had a right to free themselves. They had a right to vote. They had a right to stolen gold and silver from, I will, Earth back. I see your questions too. Don't think I'm not paying attention, right? So let's deal with this. So what happens is all of these nations began were colonized. Rwanda was colonized, Zimbabwe, so many. I can go down the list, but you understand my point that there was a time frame where colonialism just became illegal because there was so much genocide, so much violations of human rights. In the introduction of the United Nations in June 26, 1945, and the International Court of Justice, which is the successor of the Permanent Court of Justice, which existed before in The Hague, right? It was the Permanent Court of Justice when the United Nations signed their charter for peaceful means after World War II. They created an international society of nations that agreed to bring peace to the world or work together harmoniously and implement international laws that kept a check on so-called sovereign nations that felt as though they had imperial rule or imperial authority to go anywhere on the planet they wanted to and colonize the people. So the UN and the voting of the Security Council and the implementation of the United Nations Charter created what you call peremptory norms. These are norms that nations have in laws or areas of law that domestic people have no idea. You, per se, in the US, wherever you are, in different countries, you have no idea the international framework that takes place amongst nations. They're not governed by domestic law. They're governed by international laws. And these international laws are specifically like the law of reciprocity. The law of reciprocity is something like this, where you do something to a nation, if it's the law of reciprocity, I have the right to do it directly, whether it's an injury or it's a favor. I have a right to reciprocate whatever injury or whatever favor. I can do it. I can give it right back. And this is a law. It happens amongst nations. It's not necessarily a violation, like the trade laws or the trade wars that was going on between the U.S. and China and other countries. They said, okay, the law of reciprocity is if you go up on tariffs, we can go up on tariffs. If you violate, and this is a scope that you're not aware of. This scope governs nations. That's why it's not talked about in court. You don't go to court and talk about international law. You don't have international lawyers in a courtroom, right? Because why? Why can't you go call an international lawyer and say, I want you to represent my case? Because they don't represent domestic people. They don't represent citizens. They represent nations. So when you have an international lawyer, they typically represent their nation, their government, or a government that hires them in a specific court. So these nations have these peremptory norms that governs them. Diplomatic law is a peremptory norm. Foreign national protection, foreign officials like presidents, ambassadors, consul generals, embassies fall under international protection. Consulates fall under international protection. Military, they have a whole nother scope of law, which is the law of war. And you have law of space, you have nuclear law, you have so many different laws, all fall under this rubric of international law. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because nations, the criteria for a nation, in order for you as a nation to be accepted into or recognized as a nation. I'm not talking about the Nation of Islam. I'm not talking about the brothers. I have, some brothers I respect, but I'm not talking about that. That's old and it's outdated. You can't be a minister and be over a nation. You can't be a minister of Islam. You can't have a nation of Islam technically, because there are no nations that are so-called nationalities that are Islamic. Islam is not a nationality. So they don't see them as a threat. They don't see the Nation of Islam as a group of people that have a nationality, because you're claiming a religion. And religions are tolerated in nations, but that's not the nationality of a person. If a person says, what are you? You can't say, I'm Islamic. That's your religion. What's your nationality? Well, I'm a Muslim. That's a religious name. It's not a nationality. It's the same thing with the Moors. When you ask the Moors, what is the nationality? They'll say it's Moor. You're Moorish nationality. You can't be a Moor and have as a nationality, because they would ask you, what nation are you a part of? The Moroccans in Northwest Africa are Moors, technically in international law. I'm not talking about what sounds good when you're trying to give content to get viewers. I'm not talking about that crap. I'm talking about in the international scope. If you're saying you are Moor, they will say, what government are you affiliated with? You would have to have a government that's recognized by the United Nations that has a Moorish nationality or Moroccan nationality with a language, which is key. This is a criteria. Now, I said this before, and the reason why you hear me in this type of energy is because people are not listening. They just running off with what they want to think is going to work, and there's a specific criteria to freedom. Dr. Malachi Z.K. York, our president, had the criteria because one of the prerequisites was land. Now, how do nations acquire land? Well, if you are there, have indigenous roots to the land, and your people are established in a particular area and they make claims to a land, then your rights are fortified. How are your rights fortified if you make claims to a land? Well, if you were colonized. Colonialism is when a foreign government, this is what I'm trying to tell you about the United States. They are a foreign government, 13 colonies. And the father was trying to tell American Negroes that, but for some reason, I'm not talking about our people. I'm saying that the mentality that he found us in, without any land, without any knowledge of the framework of how nations work, he found us in different religious pockets. And because of that, he had to go into religion to pull you out. So you have a lot of people asking questions about, oh, he was a Muslim this year. He was with the so-called Nation of Islam. He was a Hebrew this time. He was of the Egyptian. He found each one of our people in these particular groups. How do you bring everyone together under one banner if you all have different religious affiliations, and you won't listen to a Muslim because you're a Christian? You won't listen to a Christian because you're a Hebrew. You won't listen to a Moor because you're under the Noble Drew Ali, and you're like, I don't follow the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. You're a 5% over here. The 5% is the gods on earth. You won't listen to Noble Drew Ali. You won't listen to Farrakhan. You won't listen. All of these people you won't listen to. So what? You found yourself segregated or separated. How do you bring all of these people together? How do you form a nation? By teaching them this is what you must do in order to be free. So our president had to go into these specific areas and teach Islam as Sayyid al-Imam Isa al-Hadi al-Mahdi to get the attention of all of the Muslims in America. It's because you wouldn't listen to him if he didn't come speaking Arabic or come teaching the Quran or come wearing a jalabiya and having a community for you to be aware that you have roots to Africa. He had to come as a when we were Hebrews, like Nubian Islamic Hebrews. People say we were wearing a yarmulke, those days, in a kameez, when we wore that in the 90s. And it's like, oh, you're Hebrew now. Why are you Hebrews? Because the Hebrew Israelites wouldn't listen if we were wearing Islamic attire. So now he had to switch to say, let me talk to the Hebrews now. Got the Muslims, they know who I am. Hebrews, do you know who I am? Now they know who he is. Who else did he have to go to? The Egyptologists, the so-called Egyptologists who were studying under Ben Yakinen and other so-called scholars of the Egyptian doctrine. That group of blacks wasn't listening to the religious group. So he had to go there as Atumre to teach you all in the Egyptian or Egyptology to get all of you all's attention to say, listen, we are now a nation. You have to come under one umbrella, the Nubian nation. That's why we had the flag that incorporated all of you all under one umbrella, even the Moors, because you were misguided as Moors because Noble Drew Ali passed and you didn't have a rightful successor to carry on the mission from Noble Drew Ali. So our father, in his works and his to make sure that he did his job, he wrote or revised the Circle 7 Quran. Why? Because you didn't have one. You had, and then he put the problem book together for the 5%ers. Why? Because you didn't have one. Right, and he addressed the Nation of Islam through the Zigzag Zig and the book of Lamb, where he addressed Master Fard Muhammad, because that leadership didn't have the information that Sheikh Daoud gave him about Master Fard Muhammad and the imposter. So he had to get you all's attention to say, listen, in order for all of you all to be liberated, to come together for to live of, for, and by each other, outside of religious doctrine, put that aside for a second, become a nation so you can do your own thing, you can build. So right now, when Babylon is falling, you'll be able to say, we still have our own. You can put the differences, we can work the differences out later. But y'all were focused on the differences so much that you didn't realize that the plan of our president was to gather on one specific land so we can make claims as a nation, which is the criteria for nationhood. Okay, so the land wasn't a compound. It wasn't just, oh, we got 400 acres of land. It was a capital seat, a capital city. This is why you see the obelisk up. In every capital city, you see an obelisk. You see an obelisk or Ben in where? You see it in DC. You see an obelisk in London. You see an obelisk in Athens, Georgia. With most capital city, go down to City Hall, you see an obelisk right there because it represents sovereignty. So when you lift the obelisk or you erect the obelisk, it's an antenna or a communication device. You're saying that you're communicating with the highest authority in existence in your nation, which are your overseers, your authority. The same way Washington, D.C., they had their authority, the Palladians, who were over the creation of this foreign government that came to indigenous lands of the Native Americans who came from Asia. And we have that proof. We're going to go through that genealogy. Someone asked that, right? And then you have the Olmecs who came over, or the Nubians who came over first and went over into South America and settled there prior to the continental drift coming apart, right? And the Pangea or Pangea, depending on the language, right? Our people walked, Africans, melanated people, Nubians walked over to South America, and it's proof. There's much proof, archaeological proof. There's linguistic proof. There's statues that were left, Olmec heads. Not just with that, there's carvings on walls. There's rocks. There's botanical proof of intercontinental exchange of plants. There's metal and gold that was exchanged through, and there's the current drifts that took place. There's proof of the Nubians or the Malian Empire coming over through Abu Bakr, through Let's Set the Record Straight. Our father listed this proof of how the Americas was populated. So when you try to tie in all of the information, it's very difficult if you don't know if you don't know history, and you don't know the migrations, and you don't know the genetic pool by which you come from, and how our people became mixed as Nubians. And in the Americas, you became mixed as one group of people, a special and specific mixture. You're not like other mixtures or other tribes around the world, because you were a conglomeration or mixture of Africans coming in with the slave trade, Asians who came into America through the Bering Strait 12,000, 13,000 years ago. We have the proof. The documents is right here. I have all of the findings and the migrations that, right? I have the migrations here. these are the migrations, dispersal of the first people of the Americas, coming from the Bering Strait down into over into Alaska, down into what you call Washington State now, splitting into two. A group goes into the northeastern area, creates those tribes, the Delawares, the Algonquin, the Cherokee, and all of those tribes. And then you have the other tribes that move down the coast into South America. All of the genomes and the haplogroups are related. They have the oldest found, let's say, body of a native indigenous boy who was found in Montana, and he was dated back to 12,000 years ago, right? 12,000 years ago. And they did the haplogroup testing, and majority of Native Americans, they said like 99% of Native Americans go back to this specific haplogroup that came from Proto-Siberia. This is all this studies are there, genetic studies. I'm just trying to run it down to you so you can be aware of what we have to discuss, because in order for you to truly be liberated, that's your question. Y'all want to come from up under the abuse. You don't want Trump as your president. You don't want this person over you. You don't have a president technically. If you didn't vote for Trump, you don't have a political party. You have to establish these things in order for you to be acknowledged and move as a nation and be respected as a nation. You already have the economy as a people. The Black African diaspora economy is like some $2 trillion a year you spend economic. You have one of the largest GDPs of, I think, 90% of the nations in the world. Your GDP is stronger than most of them. All your smaller countries like Nauru, Tuvalu, even the Vatican, your money spends way, even France. You spend more money, you have more money than the country of France. You just haven't organized enough, and you haven't come together enough because you're caught up in these religious doctrines that's keeping you separated. The Moors are pulling you from this way. The Nation of Islam is pulling you. They want you to worship WD Fard or Caucasoid. The Moors brothers, they want you to become a Muslim. And the Muslim group that they're in reference to comes out of Tanzania. They were used by the Arabs to enslave Africans. That's why they have the fez. If you really want to be truthful and honest and be real about it, the Moors are wearing a fez because it was given to them as an immunity to have to commit crimes on Africans in favor of the Arabs that needed Africans to go into the continent, go into these countries and make slaves out of them and convert them to Islam. And then converting them to Islam, they said, we're going to give you immunity over these people if you commit war, if you commit rape, if you commit murder, if you commit whatever crimes you commit against Africans. The Moors had the ability to commit those acts and commit those crimes, and they were fast to show they had some sort of nobility or sharif, where they get the word sheriff from. That's why the sheriff, right now, you got sheriffs all throughout those counties that carry out the laws for their hierarchy. The same thing the sharif or the sheriffs of the Moors did to carry out the laws from the Arabs to enslave Africans. And they don't tell you that. And they use it to bring it into America. And they tell you, what do they tell you? We have immunity. We are above the law. They got that from their Arab fathers, the Caucasoid, the Arab Berbers over there in Saudi Arabia, all those places where you see the Arab Berber invaders. That's why they don't have a land. They claim, oh, our land is everywhere because they were Berbers. They moved in and out of particular countries and ravaged North Africa, converted them to Islam and subjugated them to their rule. And they still doing it today, making you think that they have a nation, and they don't. Nationhood, again, is a specific criteria that has to, there's a framework. And you never seen this book before. I'm going to show you, right? This book is called The Creation of States and International Law. This book right here, this book is called The Creation of States. It is an international law book, and it covers everything about nations that you need to know, right? Which our father implemented to create our nation. We had to know this as former ambassador. I had to know these laws in order to protect the Nubian nation. And still to this day, we are still nation building. And we're going to make sure that this time is done correctly so that we can make sure our president comes out and properly sits in his seat as the president of your own nation, because obviously you're fed up. You don't have any answers to the problems of a troubled world. He is our answer. He's the one that implemented and made sure that our nation was born properly, and the proper leaders are in place to give you the information so you can properly mobilize. So when it hits the fan and these wars break out and this economic fallout break out and these diseases and other plagues that are coming, you'll have a nation that you can be a part of. That is it. If you don't want to be a part of it, we don't want you, because you're going to doubt. And we don't need anyone that has to doubt, that is doubting the method of your salvation, because you can see the world and it's falling apart. So these are laws that we had to know. Another book that I'm going to introduce you to, this is called The Law of Internet State Responsibility. This is the law of state responsibility. States have responsibilities. Nations have responsibilities. Nations have laws they have to follow. This is the book of laws that nations have to follow as it relates to their citizens, as it relates to their nationals, as it relates to other nations and treaties and agreements that you have to go into. This is a book that confirms your rights and confirms your duties. Nations, not only do they have rights, you have a duty to this international society and other nations around the world. You can't just do what you want to do on the planet. You can't just go anywhere and cause problems and do anything to your citizens that you think you want to do. And the reason why leaders are not aware of this, because they haven't studied international law, because they just don't know about nationhood. Our father, our president, is responsible for teaching us that. So another thing we're going to get into is these treaties. I wanted to show y'all this because this is vital information, so I know what I'm talking about. These are treaties that certain tribes went into that are fraudulent. I got these from the archives, National Archives in Washington, D.C., Records Administration, with the seal and the stamp, with the authentic signature and with official copies that can be used in court. So I'm gonna. This is just one. That's one treaty. This is the treaty of. This is 1824. This is the Treaty of Indian Springs. You can look it up. Treaty of Indian Springs, William McIntosh. This is why Georgia is a fraudulent state, which we think. Why we moved to Georgia, for those that really want to know why they arrested or tried to kidnap our father, because we made claims to Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia. And we own the land. The Nubian nation, Nuwaupian nation owns that land, period. I have proof. I'm well protected now. I didn't expose this information until I was in a place where I could inform you that the land that we had, the 400 acres, was not the only land. Our father sat on our father had 400 acres, right? That was the capital city where our president sat, which was sovereign land, that you all voted him in as president, right? Georgia were our settlers, Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. I'm going to tell you that the United States only consists of 13 colonies. The U.S. Constitution is illegal. It's an illegal compact. It is an agreement for the protection of human trafficking. I know this for a fact. I spoke to the international law judges. The judges in the international court has already acknowledged that the United States is an illegal entity. Colonialism was eradicated in 1960 from the Declaration of the Granting of Independence to colonial peoples. You are colonial people. You are under a colony 13 from New York, Maine, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, Virginia, North and South Carolina, Georgia, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Jersey, what else? New Hampshire, Vermont, 13 colonies. Why are they colonies? Because foreigners came to the land and set up a government to subject the indigenous and African people. That is illegal. It was illegal in 1960. So because of it's illegal, guess what? The Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, can't be held up in court. This is what they did not want you to know. This is why they arrested our father, our president, because he was about to expose the colonial aspect of your freedom and the fact that no colonial government can control indigenous or African people. Whether you mix them, whatever, you can't control them because you have no jurisdiction. How are you going to come to another land, create a government, and then subject the people to your government, and you were not even born there? You don't have no interest in the land there. You weren't responsible for growing anything there. You weren't born there. You were visiting. You came on a boat. The Georgians came to Savannah on a boat, 157 of them from Scotland, settled in 1733, and they kept coming in groves from the Scottish Macintosh. Look up McIntosh County, look up Brunswick, all of those counties in Georgia named after Caucasians from places, from foreign lands, and they took the land in land lotteries, and they committed a fraudulent Yazoo land fraud that was the biggest fraud in U.S. history, and they claimed all of the land in the South. In 1810, it went to the Supreme Court, and Judge Marshall said Georgia didn't own the land, and the U.S. took the land illegally and subjugated all of the people of the South to that land. Don't argue with me about Africa. Don't do that, because it's not necessary. That's just semantics, right? Yeah, exactly. But I don't want this to be a discussion about the semantics, because that's a diversion. It can become a distraction. I'm speaking about the Dr. Malachi Z.K. York having ownership, controlling Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. And the governor of Alabama knows it. The governor of Georgia knows it. The U.S. State Department knows this because it's in their books. And they have communication that it is fraudulent, and that the Georgia government is a fraudulent entity, and they have no jurisdiction over no one there. It's impossible to. And we'll get into that. I'm just letting you know that, because it has to get out before, so you all can come together and realize you've been bamboozled. Right? So that's what these are two of those treaties. This treaty is the Creek Treaty of August 13th, 1970. This was done by Alexander McGillivray. This is a fraudulent treaty as well. It's a misrepresentative of state. Alexander McGillivray was not an indigenous person. He signed this treaty on the behalf of the people there, and he's allowed the United States and Georgia to control the area of. There's a demarcated area on the east side of the Oconee River in Georgia, what they call Georgia today. It's an illegal treaty, and therefore the lands that they don't have jurisdiction over. This treaty right here is another one. This is what you call this treaty. I think this is the treaty. Let me get the. Oh, this is the treaty of 1803. This is the 1803. This is the Treaty of Fort Washington. This is a treaty where our land, when we purchased and we bought our land for our nation building, it was received. We claimed the land between the Ocmulgee and the Oconee rivers, because the treaties there that Georgia acquired was fraudulent. They acquired these treaties fraudulently through misrepresentation of state, through coercion and force. The Treaty of Fort Jackson is illegal. Jackson County down there in Alabama, Mississippi, Fort Jackson, all of that. General Andrew Jackson, who became the president, the moment he became president, he signed treaties forcefully against those people and took the lands. Those treaties are illegal under international law, which was eradicated and they were vitiated. That means they were done away with. I done away with them. I said they can't be held as legal binding because they were done in coercion and violation of the international law of treaties. This was all put on paper, and they were served with that. And they knew what our president was doing the moment he erected the obelisk and he put up the flags. And when we built what we built, Tom Array, they knew that we were the nation born a nation within a nation that was growing, and we were going to prepare our people for this day and time. The economic fallout, the disasters that's taking place, the civil war that's going on, the police coming in, the claiming jurisdiction over any and everybody, the conflicts that's taking place amongst ICE and immigration, all of that, a nation was built in order to protect you all from that. So all of that is there, and it's available for you to know. Now, let's backtrack, okay? I know I said a lot. I just wanted to get all of that out. I spoke for 46 minutes. I wanted to get that out, but this is our podcast, and this is the actual facts, and you all, you have to know this. So let's address the lands and the mixture of our people, because people want to know if they're Native Americans. Very small percentage of our people are native indigenous people. A very, very small. It's like less than 1%. And this is from the findings that from the genetic ancestry of African Americans, Latinos, European Americans across the U.S. This is from a well-known geneticist institution that studies haplogroups. We did this in episode 1, but we didn't get into the migrations that took place specifically in the Americas. We talked about Africa and the creation of races, but now we're going to address what happens in the Americas, right? So about let's get into this here real quick. Now, what happens is they call it the Holocene area or the Pleistocene times, right? Around 36,000 years ago, a small group of people living in East Asia, right? They began to break off into a larger ancestral population in that region. In East Asia, they began to break off 25,000 years ago. The smaller group, I'm just giving you a real brief breakdown, right? A smaller group in East Asia split. This was Asia. This is Asian haplogroups. This is Asian people. This is the Asian blood, right? It's not indigenous to America. The indigenous people to America, you would be indigenous if someone come and saw you there. Yeah, you're indigenous, but because they don't know when you came. So everyone is indigenous to the Europeans because everywhere they went, they found people there. So technically, Africans are indigenous to the Americas because we were there before them. The Asians, the Native Americans, the indigenous that came into the Americas are indigenous because we were there before them. So when you say indigenous, you have to get into context what you mean by indigenous. Are you indigenous by their definition? Yes. Are you indigenous by African definition? Not necessarily, because we know how those individuals got there. But still, for legal purposes, we are the indigenous of the South America and we are the indigenous of North America. But the dominating seed of North America that became the Native Americans are the Asians, and they are known as the Paleo-Siberians. This group came from Northeastern Asia. The other group that broke off, both groups independently began to interact at different times, but they migrated into different areas because the ice caps were melting. The Bering Strait became smaller, which allowed them to cross over. And some went over into Greenland, into Canada, and another group came down onto the west coast of Americas, went down into Mexico and down and populated South America. The reason they know this is because they took the genes of these specific groups of populations and did the genetic testing that we talked about in episode 1, the haplogroup, the alleles, and they looked at the fragment sections to see how close the DNA was related. And that's how geneticists are able to determine where you're from. When they do this 23andMe and Ancestry.com, they have this large database, is because they do with this haplogroup. Well, the haplogroup of the Native Indigenous are a specific haplogroup, particularly R, particularly E, and A, but not L. L is haplogroup L is African. We talked about that with the Sands, who became the Nuwaupians, who came over millions of years ago and before Atlantis. This is the story of Atlantis. We have a book the father has a book called The Atlantis that speaks about the lands that were set up, that were learning facilities or learning cities where people would go to vacation, right? So when you have the Asians that came over, this is why the Asians look like Indians. When you see Native Americans, when you look at them side to side, you see the cephalic eye, the eyelid, and you see the shallow hair. Why do Native Americans look Asian? Why do Native Americans look like Eskimos? Why do Native Americans look like a lot of the northern Canadians and people in the northern area? Because they're a part of the same stock from Asia. right? But the father, because the Asians, right, who came in became native or indigenous to the Americas, and the tribes began to spread out, right? And Africans who were brought in as slaves mixed in with the Olmecs and the Nubians that were already in South America millions of years ago. And you'll find them, and that's why I look at the islands like Haiti and Jamaica and St. Croix and these Pacific islands. You find these people are Nubian or African, is because they are a part of the seed that was here millions of years ago prior to the continent separating. So they were here or there already. Now, the Asians or the individuals coming from the Bering Strait, this coming down Beringia is called, is a location is between the ancestors of the Native Americans who survived the Ice Age. This location is where the ancestors of the Native Americans came into the Americas. It's a prehistoric geographical region defined as is bounded by the west by the Leon River, the Lim River in Russia, right? On the east by the Mackenzie River in Canada. So that's the location. So you'll have an idea where it is. Now they came down 17,000 on the western coast, present day Alaska, this 17,000 years ago. The ice sheets began to melt, and then the first people expanded southward. These are your true indigenous. So our people who are African Americans in the diaspora, you can say you're indigenous, but not by this particular migration. You're not indigenous by this migration. You are indigenous by the Nubian migration that came over across the water. Some of them walked, and then there was another intercession with the seed of the Malians who came over through the Can Mansa Musa, who was of the Malian Empire, right? That was a part of the Ghana Empire that came from Nubia. Some of the richest individuals there. They built large ships that came over in the hundreds of years ago. They also mixed in. So there's three migrations that you have to be aware of in the Americas. None of them are Moors, though. Okay, so don't get that Moors try to say it was part of us. No, there's no record. There's no archaeological findings of Moorish records, doctrine, any artifacts, any carvings, any mounds, any particular locations that show Moors were there. The only thing they have is a map that they created with, say it was ancient Egypt and we were part of it. That's not the case. And Moor doesn't mean, Moors is a description for a religious group. They call the Moors Morenos from Latin, Moor from French, Mauritania, Mauritius, all of that comes from the word Moor because they were Muslim Berbers. That's it. They didn't have a land. So there was no Moors coming over with a kingdom setting up. There's no proof of that. I'm just speaking the actual facts. That's why you're here. So there's three migrations, just to remember. You had the Asian migration that came over from the Siberia, right? Then you had that 17,000 years ago, right? And then you have then you have the Nubian migration that happened when the continents were closer, because the African seed was here millions of years ago, and they walked over or actually sailed, but the distance was shorter. Look at Pangea. They give you a map online where they can show how Pangea moves over a period of a few million years. They'll give you literally how far the land has separated. Well, millions of years ago, some came over, they were here. When the Malian Empire came and they were using the tides of the ocean, right? A lot of them actually came to what you call Brazil. Now look at Brazil. There's a map that exists that is in reference to it's a literal map that found in Egypt, in Nubia, that shows how far Brazil is from the West Coast. A lot of our people don't know that there's a large population of Brazilians Africans in Brazil. There's a huge population of Africans, Afro-Brazilians they call, in major communities there, and they're so close, they're like 1,500 miles away. Well, this is how the African people, the West African people, more so the Malians who are Ghanaians. Mali is not a nationality. These are just descriptions. Ghanaian is not a nationality. We are a nation of people from different tribes. We formed a nation for political aspirations and international acknowledgement and to do business with other nations, you have to create a political system in order to be accepted in the international community and sit in the General Assembly to do business and trade, etc. But most of those African nations are tribes that have come together to create a political party, just like you. You as a group of people are a group of different various tribes that has to create a political party. That is what you have to do. You have to create and recognize you can't depend on nobody else. Stop complaining. I don't want to hear from now, October 27th, 2025. None of you all should be complaining about the Donald Trump government. None of you all should be complaining about Republicans and Democrats. None of you all should be complaining about their voting system. None of you all should be complaining any longer. Stop complaining, get off your butts and start. Let's work and organize. And we're going to do something that I'm not going to introduce yet. I think it may be too fast, but it's something very powerful that we all can do at one time. Very, very powerful. We'll do it at one time. And it's legal and it's protected in international law. But the three migrations, let me just go back. The three migrations, the Nuwaupians, the Malian Empire, those tribes that came over, mixed in, right? And then the Asians up in the northeastern area of what you call the Americas. You had the nations in the west of the Mississippi, right? That are the the Crow Nation there, the Crow Nation in South Dakota. You have the Fox Nation there. You have a lot of those nations are in Oklahoma reservations. I visited there a few years ago. I helped them get their land back through the claims of Georgia because they were forced west from the the Indian Removal Act in 1930 that I told you Andrew Jackson forcefully signed. Once he got into office, he forced them off because they know Georgia knew that they didn't own the land. So they had to create a agreement to make sure that all of the indigenous moves west. Look up the Indian Removal Act, signed into office 1830. General Andrew Jackson, when he was fighting against those individuals, enslaving Africans and fighting the indigenous on behalf of Georgia. When the U.S. received the land illegally, they made allowed Georgia to create 2 additional states. The whole South, Georgia created 2 additional states. Alabama, Mississippi, one in 1817, one in 1819. They created those states to expand Georgia's control and jurisdiction because they didn't own the land, period. We own it now. It's yours. And it's going to come a time where it's going to be given back to you when you'll see when the bankruptcy hit. That's another conversation. That's everything I can't disclose right now because people may be, people get crazy and try to run ahead of what the Father's doing. So let me read this real quick. So our people will know that you're not Native Americans, not the indigenous from historical haplogroups that came from the Beringer area. Now, the first peoples, I'll read this haplogroup. The first peoples of the Americas, you have Southern Native Americans, and then you have the divergent that went to the British Columbia and those areas, the Big Lake areas over in the eastern side. And then you have the Northern Native Americans. And you had Southern Native Americans are South America. Northern Native Americans are in North America. The Southern Native Americans went to again, I'm reiterating so you'll be clear. They traveled down the coast and went into South America from that side. It was easier to migrate there because obviously the water and they could populate along the coast. And the populations that moved to northeastern or the northeastern tribes moved into the northeastern area that created the Algonquian tribes, the Nadine language groups. You had different language groups. That's all those tribes over in the northeastern area. Susquehanna, all throughout Pennsylvania. I have actually a Native American place names. Right, it's a whole list of most of the Native American. Let me get that real quick. Let me show so you can see this. This is Native American place names. All of the names in the Americas really named after Native Americans. You can open quickly. Michigan is named after Native Americans. Utah is named after Native Americans. Muskogee, you got Muskogee County in Georgia. There's so many in this book. I can go on and on. It's a lot I want to say, but I can't really go through all of this. I'm just giving you an idea of, so the next part two, the questions we'll be able to answer. But it's, let me see. Indio. It's a river in, where's this river at? In Ohio, right? Just, you go open anywhere in this book. Eagle is a native. I didn't know that was a Native American name as well. Dutch, obviously, but it's so many. Blue Earth. Tennessee is a Native American tribe. Mississippi is a culture. Tennessee, right? Illinois is a Native American tribe. Wisconsin is a Native American tribe. Obviously, Indiana, the country, the state there. It's so much there, but you're not tied to that as Africans. That's just not your haplogroup. And though you mixed in at some point later down in the southeastern area where you tried to escape slavery, so you might have mixed in with a few of those tribes like the Seminole, Blackfoot, and the Creeks, right? Which is why we came to the South, because our father knew that Africans of the southeastern area had mixed in with some of the Native American tribes, and therefore he was trying to help those individuals who identified as indigenous to bring them under one nation. That was the whole goal. Because if you could if you acknowledge these mixtures and you say, well, you're a part of us, though you may be affiliated with this particular tribe, you're still under the Nubian nation because we have the land. And in order to be recognized as a nation, you have to have land, not a reservation. People think Native American reservations, the reservations, you don't own it. You can make a reservation at a restaurant, but after you finish using it for a certain amount of time, guess what? You have to leave. So we were not considered a reservation. They wanted to make us a reservation and come up with a jurisdiction of the BIA, but that wasn't what the father had wanted. He acknowledged us as a sovereign nation, and we had our own constitution. And we voted him in 1992 through a legitimate constitutional process. And we have a constitution. And you all can get access to our constitution. It has to be redrafted because modified under our president's acknowledgement and acceptance. He wants that done because he is who he is. You all voted him in 1992. And guess what? You have the right to vote him in again. So when next time you all vote, you'll be voting for your own president. Okay, so remember that. That's something that we're going to discuss. So I don't want to get off course on what we're talking about, but you are not Native Americans or indigenous in that way. You mixed in with them at a later point. So when you look at this matriarch line, they did the haplogroup studies, and this is the proof that I'll read so you'll know that the haplogroups by which Native Americans and Africans in the Americas are have is not the same. So the maternal or mitochondrial DNA lineages show us that after the LGM, people were rapidly spreading out. Populations were growing enormously, about 60-fold between 16,000 years ago, 13,000 years ago. There was a 2-year-old boy, and this is where it all unfolded. There was a 2-year-old boy buried in South Central Montana, right? About 12,000 years ago, he was buried. His name is Anzik. That's what they called him. They called him Anzik because he was on a group of a family's property their last name was Anzik. So they just named him Anzik I. He's the oldest known person in the Americas, the only person who lived during the Clovis period whose remains have survived to present day. Anzik I, if you want to look it up, is Anzik. And it's the oldest known Native American. He's the first ancient Native American genome to have completely been sequenced. So his genome was sequenced because obviously when you have the oldest, then the oldest has, which is the latest descendant, has the connection to the migration, and it gives an insight. The geneticist gives the geneticist insight on the lineage and what haplogroups migrated where and who's who in the Americas. So this is the individual that they work with in order to find out the haplogroups. Now, in that haplogroup study, you see there's a conclusion that was based. When you read this, it speaks about the Y DNA, which is the paternal line. It says 60% 60 to 65% African Americans remains before Columbus, right? So basically this is where the haplogroups ended up. So that you have haplogroup genes before Columbus and after Columbus. They just give Columbus that time reference because obviously he claims to be first discovered America, right? But obviously there were people there, so they give that reference a time frame. But you understand the haplogroups L, which is 70 to 75% in African Americans, right? Before Columbus, 30 to 35% in Africans in America, 1% in pre-Columbian American remains. So you have 1% of Native American, pre-Columbian American genes in Africans in America. I'm saying Africans in America, not African Americans. You can't. It's no such thing as an African American. You're either from Africa genetically and you live in America, or you visit in America, but you're not African Americans. You're Europeans in America, you're Chinese in America, but the only Americans can be the indigenous, who are the individuals coming from Proto-Siberia that migrated. So I'm using Africans in America. That's why it's titled that. Now, Tennessee is a tribe. Look up the Tennessee tribe. You'll see where they got that name from. For those that, Haiti is the name of a land. Haiti is a description of Haiti. I think it's description of the land itself. It's not what you are as a nation. That's what I meant. That's a good point you pointed on. None of those places are names or nationalities of who you are. All of them are descriptions of where they found you. That's the difference. They found you in Haiti. Look at Barbados. I think Barbados means beards, because when the foreigners came, they saw these huge beards on the islands and on the mountains. Trinidad, you're not a Trinidadian, right? Tanasi, it was Tanasi from there. There you go. Tanasi from, you see? So the person says, I'm a Tennessean. No, you're not. Our people don't know who they are. That was the problem that our father came, when he came to the lands and he found and he incarnated on this planet to help and resurrect our people from the mentally dead, us being in the worst situation in the world, being moved from wherever they are and brought into a colonial government and controlled through economic exploitation. That is you. So everywhere you claim that what you are, they know that they gave you that name. If you say I'm a Georgian, you can't be a Georgian. Georgia is from George, right? King George II. You don't know him. You were not chartered to work for him. He didn't give you any authority. You didn't have any allegiance to King George. North and South Carolina, that's from Carolus, which is Charles. Look it up. It's a Latin word. The word Carolina is a Latin word for Charles. So if you say I'm South Carolinian or I'm from the Carolinas, that's a King Charles. You're not from King Charles. You have no identification or relationship with him. You're not obligated or didn't take an allegiance to King Charles. So you're not a Carolinian. You're not a Virginian. Queen Victoria, the Virgin Queen. She was a queen of England, of Europe. Look it up. She's not related to you, so you can't be a Virginian. What are you? Oh, I'm from Mississippi. You're not a Mississippian. The Mississippian is a culture. Look up the Mississippian culture. You'll see it. Alabama or Alabamers. That's a tribe. You can't be that. You can't be an Oklahoman. That's for they call them that's a tribe as well, right? So when you look at all of the names, California, that's named after a female by the name of, and everyone Queen Khalifa, right? From a whole new island, a mythical island, and they named Carolina from a woman that was a so-called ruler of a mythical island. You can go through all of those names and see that none of them are you. Even if you go to the islands, let's go back to the islands. The person say I'm Puerto Rican. How? Puerto Rican means rich port. How can you be how can a person be a rich port? When they came to the port, Europeans, whoever they were, Portuguese, conquistadors, a list of them, Marco Polo, Ponce de Leon, right? They came to these lands and they said, oh, this is a rich port. All of these people are Puerto Ricans. That's not what you are. So what are you? Person say, well, you're Moors. You can't be a Moor. Moors were Berbers that lived coming from the east to the west of northern Africa. And they controlled a certain area in the Iberian Peninsula. So it was a description that the Greeks called, the Romans in Latin called you morenos, or Spanish morenos, Moor in French, right? When you get the word Mori. So that's not a nationality. Let's keep going. Name another group, right? You go to say, I'm Florida. Florida means La Floridia. That's Spanish for flowers. So you're not a Floridian. You can't be a Floridian. Look up the word Cuba. Look up these names. They're names of the places. So they never tell you, they can't tell you who you are. Why? Because they were created and came to, right? They were bred after your creation. So they don't know who you are. You have to you have to name yourself. That's why I asked the Moors again. I keep saying, right, even with the Hebrews, I'm like, Hebrew is an action as well. You say, well, you're Hebrews, that's a nationality. That's not a nationality. You can cross the street and be called a Hebrew. Hebrew means ibar, to cross over. That's an action. You can't be called a verb. You can do a verb, you can act as a verb, but you can't be a verb, right? So you can describe the person's actions. So if you say I'm a Hebrew Israelite, when you look at the word Israel, Israel means El will prevail. Okay, but what is your nationality? Well, we're Hebrew Israelites. What was Abraham? If Jacob was the son of Isaac and Isaac was the son of Abraham, what was Abraham? He was a Chaldean. Was he from Babylon, Mesopotamia? So you're Mesopotamian by genetics, right? By blood, if you really want to think about it, right? So it's not a nationality. So they keep trying to attach all of these things to you, actions. When you say Creek, people say I'm of the Creek Nation. That's where you went to get water from, a creek. Oh well, I'm a Seminole. What do you mean Seminole? What is Ur of Chaldees? So right, you're a Chaldean. So Hebrew Israelites should be a Chaldeans. If all the Hebrew Israelites want to give you a nationality, they want you to convert to their doctrine. They should be what their father Abraham was, and Abraham was a Chaldean. He was from Ur of Chaldees. He was a Babylonian. So now they want all Africans in the diaspora to become Mesopotamians. Then they have to teach you what a Mesopotamian doctrine is. They don't know. Now, when you hear the word Nuwaupu or Nuwaupian, then the whole world has to ask, what is that? It's like, what is a Nuwaupian? Thank you. That's the point. Because that's the first word that's introduced where you create the definition. You have to explain to them who you are now. You picking up names that everybody want to give you because you want to be a part of this. You want to be, I'm a Muslim. Okay, I'm with the Nation of Islam. I'm Asiatic. God told me more. You're Asiatic black. What does Asiatic mean? It's a Greek word. I'm like, why you keep picking up words from people, foreigners, the foreign names that they give you, and then you claim it and wear it on your back, and you happy because the Greeks called you an Asian, and you say, I'm an Asiatic black man. Are you from Asia? The Asiatic black men are Hindus. They're Indian. Black skin, 6 ether hair. You're not an Asian, right? So you're not an Asiatic black man. So it's okay. So who are you? Tribe of Shabazz. I'm from the Sheshbar tribe. The tribe of Shabazz. Where's the tribe of Shabazz? They can't explain that. Even the Nation of Islam talking about, well, your hair was originally straight. That's why your eyebrows are straight, and you became cursed, so your hair became kinkly or negroid or nappy. That's the racist doctrine that they teach. Anu is an Allah. He's not the Allah. He's an Allah. There's many Allahs. So the Nation of Islam, they don't have the answer for you. Obviously, the Moors don't have the answer to you. Noble Drew Ali did well. I'm not taking anything from Noble Drew Ali. The father mentions Noble Drew Ali in Pahadayan. It's an actual fact where he acknowledges Noble Drew Ali as the third seal that was broken to break the spell that came before him as the one to break the seventh seal. As the angel Michael, Malachi, Zadok, right? Marduk, in Marduk Gal, Melchizedek in flesh, Panabab Yanun, the being that you see here, came with the answers to free you. And in order to truly be free from under their rule, you have to fall up under a nation. Not fall, stand. Let me remove that word fall. You have to stand with your nation under a specific flag. That's the only way you're going to be protected. The only way you're going to be protected if you align yourself with a nation in this day and time with land that we own and a language. We have a language called Sabbatic, Misbatia, right? Which is the language of the ancient Sabaeans. And they migrated. A lot of our tribes migrated west. You're a part of those specific tribes because most of them migrated to west and then came to the Americas. And you're a combination of those various seeds. You're not a pure indigenous. You're not a pure African. You're a mixture, which is a very significant group of people that acknowledges the atrocities that's been carried out over you from foreign rule, from colonialists. Right. And these individuals have kept you subjected. And the U.S. as a colonial government must not have no longer have jurisdiction over you. They don't have jurisdiction over you. If you ever go to a court and you ask them, what gives you the authority to bring me in the court? That's the first question you ask. It's not disrespectful. You as a person, you have to go back to the seed to say, what gave you, I'm a human being. You're mankind. I'm man. You're a kind of man. What gave you the authority to say, I have to come into this building? You send me a letter, summons to court. Why does this piece of paper give you authority? You wrote something down, signed with a signature, put a particular name and said, come into my court. You're going to be charged with a crime. What makes this paper different from this piece of paper? What if I wrote a paper saying, I'm not coming to your court. I don't think you have jurisdiction over me. You are a visitor. You came here, established a colonial government to subject indigenous and African people to your rule for human trafficking as a RICO, illegal organization to protect the economic institution to make money off of us as property. You are no longer considered legal and you no longer have jurisdiction to bring me into your court. I'm sending it back. Why can't you do that? What's the problem? You can't? Yes, you can. Because you have a right to not be abused, period. They don't have perpetual authority over you. And they came with, let me read this to you. Declaration of not established the kangaroo court, a system itself. You're right, kangaroo court system. Let me read this for you. This is what I wanted you to understand what you have a right to do and how nations became independent. This is the Declaration of Granting of Independence to Colonial Countries and Peoples, General Assembly Resolution 1514. Write it down. December 14th, 1960. It says, being mindful, the determination proclaimed by peoples of the world. You are peoples of the world. When I'm talking about you, include yourself in this emphasis. It says, conscious of the need for the creation of conditions of stability. You need stability. You haven't been stable for 100 years. And well-being, you need well-being and peace and friendly relations based on respect. You need to be respected. I'm ad-libbing. When I read, I'm ad-libbing to you so you can get this in your brain. On respect for the principles of equal rights and self-determination of all peoples. You have a right to self-determine who and where and how you want to be governed. You don't have to keep taking this, what you're taking. Self-determination of peoples and of universal respect of observance of human rights and fundamental freedoms without distinction as to race, sex, language, or religion. Recognizing the passionate yearning for freedom. You all have a passionate yearning for freedom. It doesn't matter how much money you got. Doesn't matter where you are in that system. You want freedom from tyranny. That's what you want. And we know that. Recognizing the passionate yearning for freedom in all dependent peoples and the decisive role of such peoples in their attainment of their independence. And please share again this so people can catch the last hour of this lecture. Let's move forward. considering the important role of the United Nations in assisting the movement for independence. This is what we want. You all have a right to it. That's the only thing you saying you want. You don't want to be a part of their system. You don't want anything from them. They can't give you anything anymore. You won't get equal rights. You done marched enough. You done protested enough. You done civil rights, sat on a bus enough. You done did all those things enough. So it's time for your independence, but you have to make sure you're willing to go forward with it, because as this says, it's irresistible and irreversible. And you're going to hear those words. Convinced that the continued existence of colonialism, listen, the continued existence of colonialism. The U.S. is a colonial nation. It's a colonial government. It's basic, right in your face. 13 colonies signed the Declaration of Independence. If that's not colonial enough, then I don't know what is. I'm saying this loud enough so it can reach deep inside. It says, convinced that the continued existence of colonialism prevents the development of international economic cooperation. It impedes the social, cultural, and economic development of dependent peoples. You're dependent peoples. You're dependent on their system. You're dependent on their economy. You're dependent on their driver's license. You're dependent on their passports. You're dependent on their benefits. You become dependent on them. And it says that convinced that the continued existence of colonialism prevents the development. You can't develop as a nation and international economic cooperation because it impedes social, cultural, and economic development of dependent peoples and militates against the United Nations ideal of universal peace, affirming that peoples may, for their own ends, freely dispose of their natural wealth. You have natural wealth. In Alabama, Mississippi, the lands that we have is natural wealth beneath that land. And that land is in our trust. We have a state trust. And Dr. Malachi Z.K. York is the head of all of it. That's why they don't want him. That's why they arrested him. That's why they kept him from y'all. That's why they put this case up and made it appear as though, he was responsible for all this so they can destroy his name and get in your emotions, and you turn on him and you mess up your own freedom. Now you can't find your way because you allowed them to make you turn against someone who came to save you. That's what they do all the time. And you fell for it. And you steady arguing like, no, but the case, but this, the courts, I was there. I know the entire conspiracy. That's why I'm involved with it, because I know what they were trying to hide. I was in court. I argued with the judge and they sent the jurors out of the box. People don't know that. I was in courtroom for my father when I walked in to testify to show the conspiracy and how Georgia had committed a massive amount of fraud and they didn't own the land, and they were trying to prevent people who were allowed to make claims, and they settled claims with certain individuals, people who made claims before. And this is the receipt of the claims, the payment from the Secretary of Treasury, Joseph Norse, who settled a $4 million claim that people said when Georgia sold lands to them, they didn't own the land. These people wanted their money back. And Georgia didn't have the land. They didn't have the money, and they couldn't give them the land because they didn't own it. This is the state of finances. Number 5, it was signed November 18th, 1818. This is a list of claimants that claim against Georgia, these companies that Georgia created to sell Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia illegally. Look up the Fletcher and Peck case, 1810. All you got to do is type in Fletcher and Peck, and you can see how one of the claimants brought Georgia all the way to the Supreme Court because they were selling land that they didn't own. And the United States knew about it, and Georgia tried to hide it, and they sold it to the U.S., and the U.S. took it and let Georgia run it and allowed them to make 2 additional governments, Alabama and Mississippi. That's why the whole South was considered one racist environment. And the father, Dr. Malachi Z.K. York, was about to expose it, and he claimed the land, and we had 400 acres, and we were going to claim the rest of it. And they came up with a case because they tried to silence him from you all having your own Nubian nation. That's the bottom line. And I was there, and I have the facts. I got everything in front of me. I went to the international court. I went to the Hague. I made sure they had our application. I made sure the governors had it to protect you all. And they came out and attacked me. And that's what you hear these niggas all around. They do it every time. They come out and try to attack the people for their own master. And they don't even know what's going on. But let's continue, and you'll know how this colonial government, Georgia specifically, is not real. Is not a real entity. And this Declaration of the Granting of Independence to Colonial Countries and People speaks about these types of governments. Let's move forward. Believing that the process of liberation is irresistible and irreversible. Your liberation, what you've been fighting for, you can't go back on it. You can't reverse. You can't go back into slavery. You can't go back into their subjection. And their constitution is illegal. Let's move forward. Irresistible and reversible. And in that order, to avoid crisis, an end must be put to colonialism. How are you going to put an end to colonialism? How are you going to put an end to the United States colonialism against you? It's going to tell you how to do it. You have to declare, and you will be granted independence. But you have to declare it the right way, not what these Negroes are doing with this fake sovereignty stuff. Claim they don't know what they're doing. Period. So stop following them and tell them I said it. If they got a problem, send them this channel. Send them this episode. Send them this lecture. And I bet you none of them will come and try to speak and talk against it because they know I know what I'm talking about. Welcoming the emergence in recent years of large number of dependent territories into freedom and independence, and recognizing the increasing powerful trends toward freedom in such territories which have not yet attained independence. We were there. We obtained independence, but you were fighting people in the public that didn't know anything. They were fighting. I'm not saying you all, but you get what I'm saying. I'm saying the mentality. That's what the actual facts, which we're out trying to change for people that are not aware of what was taking place. We were obtaining independence. But when y'all looked at our land, they was like, oh, that's a compound. And that they wasn't labeled it. If they would have said, that's the capital seat of the Nubian nation, of the Nuwaupian nation, of the people that think with reasoning. They're not Black. They're not Haitian, they're not Caribbean, they're not from the Carib, they're not Barbadians, they're not Trinidadians, they're Nuwaupian, they're Nubians, they're a new breed, a new being that is here to claim our independence and sovereignty from these perpetrators of evil that have plagued us for 6,000 years. Do we have a right to do it? Let's continue. They're telling you this is the international law. That's what I'm saying. This is the area that we can protect our nationals. That's why I have, if you want to become a national, just acknowledge this because it's going to take a process. And I'm going to walk you through it so you'll be able to help us, right, identify who our president is, and we'll make sure he comes home. So let's move forward. It says back up. It says welcoming the emergence and freedom and independence, and recognizing the increasingly powerful trends towards freedom in such territories which have not yet attained freedom, independence. Convinced that all peoples have an inalienable right to complete freedom, the exercise of their sovereignty, and the integrity of their national territory. Excuse me. Were we exercising, the Nubian nation under our president, Dr. Malachi Z.K. York, exercising their sovereignty and their integrity just because they didn't understand it, just because they didn't recognize or know what culture was, just because we wear our own cultural attire? We have a right to do that. You don't bother no other nation when they dress the way that they want to dress, when they speak the language they want to speak. But because we're not just slaves and we acknowledge our own freedom, then you want to get mad because we want to be who we are, because you no longer can make money off of us. The moment you stop making money for him, the moment you become your own nation and say, we don't have to listen to what you say. We don't need your driver's license. We don't need your money. We can print our own money. We don't need your passports. We have our own passports. We have our own driver's license. We have our own education system. system. We have our own police system. We have our own defense ministry. We have these things on our own. They're going to come out and say, oh, they're rogue. Oh, they're a cult. They say, oh, why? Because we practice in a culture. That's what it is. The Caucasoid, the Adamites, the moment you have a culture, but you want to have St. Patrick's Day, you could wear green up and down these parades, all up and down the street. You can have Valentine's Day, which is a Greek holiday or Roman holiday where they, so-called shooting, pink, fat little white babies with bow and arrows. You can have Santa Claus, who was not American. You can have that day, but when we practice, is that not a cult? Are your basketball teams cults? Where people are going crazy over these figures going up and down and boxing shorts and tank tops, shooting a rubber ball in a hoop, and they buying the jerseys, crying, paying tickets, paying money. Y'all gather and worship and cry and cheer and yell. That's not a cult. But don't try to play us like that. These days are over. Your time is at its end. Okay, so you let them know I said it. And I'm defending you all from them, and I'm protecting our Father who has to come home out of the grips of the beast because they know who he is and they knew what he was doing. And you all have to stand up for it because you don't have no time. If you don't, you're going to be in a part of their destruction that's coming to him and the Adamites, the Caucasoids' judgment. They're about to get their judgment. They're getting it now. You're either going to be on their side to receive their judgment or separate yourself and be a part of your own free nation and do your own thing and survive what's about to come in the next 5 years. Convinced that all peoples have inalienable rights to freedom, exercise their sovereignty, and the integrity of their national territory. Solemnly proclaims the necessity of bringing to a speedy and unconditional end to colonialism. It has to be done speedily, speedily. It has to be done away with. An unconditional end to colonialism. What does the end to colonialism mean? It means the eradication and the elimination of a constitution that claims jurisdiction over you, jurisdiction over our Father, to bring him and try to sentence him to 135 years because you don't want to end colonialism. You don't want to lose power over the people that you've been abusing for 400 years. You don't want to end it, but we know how to end it, and we're going to end it, and it is ended. It has ended. Now, as long as you get this information, you'll be aware on how it's ended, but you have to make the will and the decision. Okay, so I'm going to read the book of Revelations, Byron, so you'll know what's coming in the next 5 years. We're in Revelation 17 right now. Okay, so let's read this and we'll move forward. It says, the subjugation of peoples to alien subjugation. So subjection. Listen to this. Listen and think about the U.S. as a nation, a colonial compact they created. This is describing them verbatim. The subjection of peoples to alien subjugation. New York, New Jersey, these are all New Jerseys. Old Jersey, New Jersey, Old York, New York, Pennsylvania, William Penn, Quaker, Queen Victoria, alien. Georgia, King George, alien. King Charles, alien. Mary's Land, the wife of Lord Baltimore, alien. Alien subjugation, domination. They've been dominating you in every areas of your life, dominating the corporate field, dominating the economy, dominating the food market, the agricultural market, dominating the farms, dominating the schools, dominating the education, dominating the judicial system, dominating the government. That's all they've been doing, dominating you. And exploitation constitutes a denial of fundamental human rights. You have been denied fundamental human rights for 400 years. It's contrary to the Charter of the United Nations and is an impediment to the promotion of world peace and cooperation. 2, all peoples have the right to self-determination. What is self-determination? The ability to make a determination on your future. You have a right to make a determination. If you don't want to vote for, if you don't want none of them to be a president, you don't want the Republican, you don't want the Senate, you don't want none of them, you're tired of it, vote for Dr. Malachi York. Vote for him. What's the problem? You scared? They vote a racist in office. They vote a bigot in office. You couldn't do nothing about it. Why? Because the people vote. The people spoke. So now it's time for you to speak. We voted him in 1992, and we're going to vote him out of prison. Kwame Nkrumah was voted out of prison in 1957. The British had locked him up on false charges. Look it up. The people voted. They took a unanimous vote in Ghana, right here in my country. And the British had to open the door because the will of the people made him their sovereign. And that's what you have to do. Period. And don't let nobody come along and talk about vote for me. That's not going to happen because I told you in the very beginning, when you hear this information, people are going to try to use it and come up, the Moors, Hebrew, they're going to try to use it, but they can't because I waited for them to be quiet till they run out of stuff to say before I made my point. And there's more to say. I only touched the tip of the iceberg. Now let's finish this so you'll see how you are a part of the granting of independence to colonial peoples. You are a colonial people. I argued this at the UN. You have pictures of myself at the UN arguing the same point 15 years ago. The same information. I gather more now. And now with your vote, we're going to shake the world up. Trust me when I say that. I know what I'm talking about. Number 3, inadequacy of political, economic, social, and educational preparedness should never serve as a pretext for delaying independence. That's very powerful. This is law now. I'm telling you, this is international law. What does this mean? It says, inadequacy of political, economic, and social educational preparedness. People say, we're not prepared. We're inadequate in our political body. So what? So what? Look what you've been through. You have a right. You haven't been in the best position to be. Look what they did to your nation in 2002. They arrested your president. They decimated your capital city. They brought false charges against them. Lies, slander, gossip, no DNA, no pictures, no video, all hearsay. They did that and they made your political, economic, and social preparedness, they made it appear inadequate. So now when I'm talking, I'm saying we can do this, people in the back of their mind like, nationalize, just anyone wants to get recognized right now. And just that's why I said Nubian Nation member or supporter. This is the pretext of it, because we have to be prepared. I have to walk you through this because by 2027, this has to be done. And I'll tell you why I have that date, right? You have about a year to do this. I'm talking about everyone that's listening. You have to be prepared for this. At least 144,000 that the Father wants to reach. Let's read this. Now, exactly, this is the preparation. It says all armed action or repressive measures of all kinds directed against dependent peoples. Who are dependent peoples? You are. You're the peoples that have been made dependent upon his system. That's why it makes reference to you like that. This is a legal term. It doesn't say race, doesn't give a specific creed. It just says dependent peoples. You are those people. Right? All kinds directed against dependent people shall cease in order, listen to this, in order to enable them to exercise peacefully and freely their right to complete independence, and the integrity of their national territory shall be respected. They did not respect our national territory. They violated. They came in with 300 armed guards from all over various jurisdictions. They violated our territorial integrity. They violated our sovereignty, our sovereign territory. They arrested our head of state, which is illegal. In our quest, in our movement for independence, we were exercising and moving, which is irreversible and irresistible. It says all armed or repressive measures of all kinds directed against us shall cease in order to enable them to exercise peacefully. You have a right to exercise peacefully. You have a right to vote peacefully. The one thing that everyone in the world acknowledges, when a people vote, they all congratulate. Congratulations, Kenya had the peaceful democratic or transition of power. Liberia does it. Congratulations to the president of Liberia and the government of Liberia for exercising a peaceful transition of power and allowing the people to vote on a democratic process. Right? You are the power. All you have to do is stand up one time. That's it. You don't have a whole lot. It don't take a whole lot of money. It don't take a whole lot of this and that. It just takes you uniting. How do you unite? In one state. One state of what? One state of mind. Nation states right now, you can be in a New York state of mind. And guess what? All New York people act alike. Why? They're not from the same borough. They may not be from the same city, but guess what? They got a New York state of mind. What does that mean? That means that if you saw a New Yorker in Russia, if you saw someone from Brooklyn in France, how do you know they're from New York? They act, they walk alike, they move alike, they talk alike, they got the slang, they got the bop, they got the this, they got the hat, New York hat, New York state of mind. They think a state is not a place. Literally, that's a part of the spell. When you say, where are you? Right? New York state of mind. You can have a Georgia state of mind. So the state is the mind, how you think and how you act. You have a reasoning mind. That's why you're listening to this, because you have a reasoning mind. You've been listening for 1 hour and 45. Why? Because it makes sense. If I was talking some trash or talking some garbage or some gossip or some slander, you couldn't listen for 1 hour and 43 minutes, because we are reasoning together. You got me? So in that reasoning, you're in the same mind. That's how we unite. As a Nuwaupian, we reason. That's what Nuwaupu is. It's sound right reasoning. No other people reasons on the planet like you. Religious people don't reason. That's why religion doesn't fit well with you. It doesn't make sense. It's just like, okay, I get it. I got that. It may be a God. Okay. It may be a heaven. I feel that. Okay. You're scaring me possibly to think that I need to convert. But because if it doesn't make sense, it just doesn't resonate. But you're made to feel guilty because you're not in the mind of another foreigner. They want you in the mind of the Arabs. They want you in the mind of the Greeks. They want you in the mind of the Romans. They want you in the mind of the Mesopotamians and Babylonians. And they want you in the mind of the Israelites. They want you in those minds, but we have our own natural nature as a people. You have a reasoning mind. This is why the Father says you are Nuwaupians, you are Nubians. And that's why no one knows what it is, because they can't use, other races don't use reasoning because they don't have a divine mind that you have. You have a divine mind because you have a soul and you have the ability to pull reasoning from a mental reservoir that no one has access to. Only you have access to it. That's why things have to make sense. Animals don't reason. They learn through instincts. And things they don't learn through reasoning, like don't let me cross the street because 50 deers got hit yesterday. I'm not going to go this way. Let's go the other way. Let's create a bridge, y'all, because that's reasoning. They don't have that. So when you have people, right, as a people, you have to have a reasoning mind, right? You have to have a reasoning mind, and that's what makes you the person that you are. That's what connects us together. Why do you think we're connected globally? Why do you think we're worldwide? Because all of us connect. MindLink, we have an actual fact called MindLink. For those that want to check it out, of course, you know to email me for any of the actual facts in Paturat. But the Father expresses that. That's why he gave us, introduced the name. Because this is truly who you are, not where you're from. Who you are, where you are, is different. You may be in a specific place. You may be located in a particular land. It doesn't mean that's who you are. So let's finish with this so we'll know, right? Because you see, it can go in different directions. What it says is immediate steps. Let's move back. Immediate steps shall be taken in trust. Listen, that's why I said we have a trust, right? We have a trust. All of your property, all of your land, all of your licenses, all of your certificates are made out of trust. What does that mean? It means that a state or a nation or a country has a trust that protects the assets of the people. You as a people, your assets that you have, that you're given, the state takes it. Whatever state you're born in. If you're born in Pennsylvania, you're born in Nevada, you're born in Hawaii, wherever you're born, the state takes your assets and places it in a trust. Everything that you're born with, what are you born with? You're born with a lifetime of land that you're given, a lifetime of air that you can breathe, a lifetime of substance on the planet that the earth, natural nature, gives you by natural order. Food is free for you in your lifetime. Water is free for you in your lifetime by being naturally born on this planet. Every human being, every Nagar Nadu, every Negroid, every Black African diaspora, whatever you want to call yourself, every Nuwaupian, every Nubian, you're born with a certain amount of assets and benefits that the state collects, places it in a trust. Then they issue you a certificate and you claim your benefits when you turn 18. State benefits. You think it's theirs. It's really them giving you what they took from you at birth to manage it. That's what governments are set up, to manage the assets of the people. Governments are not supposed to control. They're supposed to manage it in a fit order by issuing you and issuing the benefits in a reasonable and equitable fashion to people to exist in a healthy society. So they say, we're going to issue you a driver's license to give you the right or the, let's say, license to drive on the land that you own or that's in the trust, right? All of your licenses to practice medical, right? In the medical field, your doctorate license, your nurse's license comes from the trust. Your certificates, birth certificates, death certificates, marriage certificates are issued from the trust. Do you have a trust? Our president, we have a trust established with all of the benefits, including those 3 states, Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia. All of the resources are in our trust. And the benefits are there for you as a part of our nation. When the bankruptcy hits and the collapse falls, everything that we have, everything that's in the trust belongs to the people, and you will benefit from that. You just have to be acknowledged as a part of the Nubian nation. But this is what this is an international law document. This is from the General Assembly. And they're saying it right here. Immediate steps shall be taken in trust. They saying that not trust as in I trust you, but trust as in steps of government official paperwork and documentation. What is those steps? Of a non-self-governing territories or all the territories which have not yet obtained independence. The steps are identifying you, making sure you have an ID. making sure that you are acknowledged as a part of the Nubian nation, making sure you're able to vote when it's time, making sure that you have access to when we build our infrastructure, when we build the education system, when we build the things that's needed, you have that there. So let's move forward. It says any attempt, no, let's back up. It says independence to transfer all powers to the people of these territories without any conditions or reservations, in accordance with their free express will and desire, without any distinction as to race, creed, or color, in order to enable them, you all, to enjoy complete independence and freedom. Any attempt aimed at the partial or total disruption, this is what they did to us in May 8, 2002, when they arrested our president. Any attempt aimed at the partial or total disruption of the national unity and the territorial integrity of a country is incompatible with the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations. 7, all states, right, shall observe faithfully and strictly the provisions of the Charter of the United Nations, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and present declaration on the basis of equality, non-interference into the internal affairs of states. They can't interfere into your internal affairs. And respect for the sovereign rights of all peoples and their territorial integrity. That's just one area of law that protects you. And all of this is for us. There's nothing that we're fighting for that's outside of the parameters of our legal right. And this is something that I had to learn, and in order to protect our nation, to protect our president, to protect our land, to protect our people, and the right format and of freedom fighters, all of them followed a specific framework. That framework was a pattern of freedom and the entrust that allowed nations to become independent, where you say Ghana, right, March 6, 1957. That's the independence. When you see that, any date you see where a nation has become independent, it's because they had decolonized. When you see June 26, 1992, was the date our nation had decolonized from the U.S. and their system. And they came out against the father, created a case, and tried to hide him away in ADX Max. And they didn't expect us to untangle or find the massive amount of fraud that where they have no jurisdiction over us as a people. You're literally free. You don't even know it. So a part of the moving forward with the process is in this freedom fight, moving forward for yourself, your future, your children, even at this point, which is vital. The U.S. was supposed to inform the United Nations of our existence. This is one of the violations that they did not do. They didn't inform the world that we existed, which they were supposed to do. And this particular resolution, which was adopted in the reports of the Fourth Committee in 1959, this was prior to this Declaration of Granting of Independence to colonial countries and people. You all, the process of how we all obtain our independence is laid out in this particular resolution. And the resolution is Resolution 1541. It's principles which should guide members in determining whether or not an obligation exists to transmit the information detailed under Article 73. Article 73 of the United Nations, Charter speaks about what you call self-determination. I'll just briefly read one section. It says, to ensure with due respect for the culture of peoples concerned, their political, economic, social, and educational advancement, their just treatment, and their protection against abuses. B, to develop self-government, we have to have our self-government. That's just it. You have to find the competent, you have to acknowledge this is a process you can do. It's very free. Now, it says to develop a self-government, to take the account of the political aspirations, to take due account. Listen to this. They have to take due account to your political aspirations of the peoples. You are the people. your political aspirations. If you want to say we want our own president, you can do that. They have to take that into consideration. And to assist them in the progressive development of their free political institutions. So in our political institutions, we have our president who's illegally kidnapped, that we're going to make a statement by voting him in, and by next year, we're going to have a global vote, and you're hearing it now, which is a right. We have established political institutions according to the particular circumstances of each territory and its people. The territory is not a prerequisite by size. When you hear territory, most people think it has to be large. No. We had 400 acres. One of the smallest nations is the Vatican. Look how big the Vatican is. The Vatican is like, I think, 4.3 square kilometers. Literally. Let me see it real quick. It's right here. Some of the smallest nations in the world. Right here. Pull it up. The Vatican City, area of some small states. This is what in this international law, it's just affirming that it doesn't matter how big it is. When people say, "Oh, you're not a real nation," like, shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. You live in a ghetto in somewhere in Detroit, and you're trying to tell somebody about nationhood. It says the Vatican is 0.4 square kilometers. 0.4. Monaco, 1.5 square kilometers. Nauru, 21 square kilometers. Tuvalu, 26 square kilometers. Marshall Islands, 187 square kilometers. St. Kitts and Nevis, 267. Maldives, Malta, 315 square kilometers. So it's no prerequisite on the size. You just have to be organized enough and have the know-how and how to operate and run and govern yourself. And this chapter 11 of the Declaration of Regarding Non-Self-Governing Territories, you have a right to your political aspirations. And it says the colonial government, the U.S., is to assist them in progressive development. They're supposed to help us in our recognition by maintaining our integrity for our territorial boundaries, not infringing on our sovereignty, not sending law officials or enforcement into our lands. This is a violation of international law. That's what we're speaking of. Development of their free political institutions according to their particular circumstances of each territory and its peoples and their varying stages of advancement. C, to further international peace and security. D, to promote constructive measures of development to encourage research and to cooperate with one another, and when and where appropriate, with specialized international bodies with a view of the practical achievement of the social, economic, and scientific purposes set forth in this article, A. And then it moves forward. But the point is, let me read this. So that's the Article 73. But what I wanted to point out is that Principle 1, which you have to do, it says, this is really small. Let me put the extra light on here. Right? This is what you have. This is what something. I'm just pointing out methods of freedom. That's it. I'm not. That's the bottom line. That's where we are right now. It says the authors of the Charter of the United Nations had in mind Chapter 11 should be applicable to territories which were then known to be of a colonial type. You are a colonial type. Georgia is a colonial type. When our people, Nuwaupians, Nubians, our nation, when we came to the land every year to our Independence Day, Independence Week, which is June 26th, right? The colonial type, it says an obligation existed to transmit information under Article 73 of the Charter in respect of territories whose people have not attained a full measure of self-government. We didn't have a full measure of self-government. We were moving towards self-government. I was appointed ambassador accredited to the U.S., accredited to the UN. There was other ambassadors appointed. A secretary of state was appointed, right? We were moving in the area. Our government office official buildings were on the land, on our territory, operating from 404 Shadydale Road, where people say it was obelisks, it was pyramids up. That was our sovereign territory. And we were moving towards self-government, but they were supposed to assist in that process and transmit information to the UN about who we are, so our rights wouldn't be violated. Right, thank you, Dion. Marshall Islands are very small, right? And they govern themselves very, very respectfully. It doesn't matter how large they are. They have a international law maxim that says a midget is a dwarf is just as a man as a giant with respects to international law. Whether you're a small nation or large nation, no one can infringe upon your rights just because you're a smaller nation. China cannot destroy or come against a smaller nation just because the population is only 3,000 or 30,000, which we have. We're just as much as an equal nation as any other nation. So all of that slave servitude and mentality that people talk about, we don't need that over here. Oh, y'all can't do this. First, Negroes always, y'all can't do this. You can't do this. You can't do that. The massa, you can't leave the plantation. Where you gonna go? How you gonna eat? Where you gonna sleep? Man, I ain't doing that. Y'all crazy. That's a slave mentality. That's what Negroes is talking about all through all these social media platforms because they're afraid. They're their pets. They've been groomed by the Caucasoid. They've been made in his image and after his likeness. They got their own Genesis story. The Adamites them bred new Negroes and put the mark of the beast in their hand and in their heads where they can't even think for themselves. And they open their hand for a check so they can't even work or do things on their own. That's the mark of the beast that we're going to talk about, which is taking place now. And you have to separate yourself from that. If you don't, then it's on you. The solution is here. We're not begging nobody to be a part of it. If you want to believe the Caucasoid and his lies, that's on you. You take what comes with his destruction. That's what's going to happen. But if you're part of a moving nation and you want to secure your future, you better get on board, because everything we're speaking on this actual facts is all wise, right, and exact. No one can argue this. You're not going to find no one coming in the comments. You're not going to find anyone coming or trying to debate against us. They may debate their religious doctrine and they still will lose, but they're not going to debate these facts, not when it comes to international law and nationhood. The Caucasoid knows this. They won't tell you this. All of those nations know exactly what I'm talking about. This book right here, The Creation of States and International Law, covers it all. But what my point is that when you have political aspirations and you have not yet obtained independence, they have, under this principle, right, they have an obligation exists to transmit information under Article 73 in respect of such territories where people have not yet attained full measure of self-government, right? Then when you go down to Principle 2, it says non-self-governing territories in a dynamic state of evolution and progress, which we are, towards a full measure of government, which we are going to do, as soon as a territory and its people obtain a full measure of self-government, the obligation ceases. The moment we are obtained we at that full measure of self-government, where we have our bodies in place, we have our diplomats in place, we have our institutions in place, we have our domestic laws in place, we have our legislature in place, our canons, we have our judges, our courts, our police system, everything that helps and works with us equally, non-discriminatorily, and we have that in place, then they no longer have the obligation to transmit the information to the United Nations. However, right now, they have an obligation to do so because they just don't want to, because they know they have our president in prison. That's the problem. Now, that's a big issue for them. So obligation 3, 2 miles long. Wow. It says obligation to transfer information under Article 73 of the Charter continues right? An international obligation and should be carried out with due regard to the fulfillment of international law. Prima facie, there's an obligation to transmit information. Let me move on to, I wanted to read this specific part about voting. Okay, right here. 7. A non-self-governing territory can be said to have reached full measure of government by emergence of a sovereign independent state, which we had. Free association with an independent state, integration with the independent state. This is where we are with this. Free association should be, this is your free association, should be the result of free and voluntary choice by the people, you, of the territory concerned, expressed through informed and democratic process. It should be one with respects the individuality and the cultural characteristics of the territory and its people, and remains for the people and retains for the people of the territory the freedom to modify the status of that territory. So you have a right, you have all these rights there. It's so much that we have to go through. I just wanted to touch on that so you'll be aware of where we are. Now the choice is yours. The choice is ours. I'm in place. We're doing what we need to do for our nation, right? Myself, the legal criteria is there. Everything is there. You need to be aware that the U.S. doesn't own Georgia, Alabama, or Mississippi. We have the claims. You have a right to make the claim. We made the claim for you all. Our president has sacrificed much when he came, incarnated, came to the West, born in Africa, born in Ghana, coming to the West, establishing a nation for his people to be saved from the Babylon falling and the evil system that has kept you under a spell for 6,000 years, giving you, reintroducing your culture, reintroducing your language, giving you the actual facts, the patarak, the actual facts, and the right knowledge that you need in order for your brain, your mind to grow into the new being that you're supposed to be for this new cycle. You already feeling the effects. You already have accepted the actual facts. It resonates with you. You can research it. Facts are irrefutable. You can not accept it, but you can't disprove it. That's the difference with our doctrine and any other doctrine. You can't disprove facts. No one can deny that the sun shines. People may not like the heat. They might not like the sunburn. They might not like the intense rays, but you can't deny that the sun is responsible for every human being's life that has ever walked this planet. Every animal, every herb, every plant, every fruit, every shrub, everything that has grown, every tree, that sun is responsible for the growth of that species. That is acceptable. Why? Because it's factual. You don't have feelings about our feelings aren't involved with facts. They may be shocking. They may be a little daunting when you look at when we have our conversations about religion. And I know this is a whole different area of religious doctrine. This is a freedom because I wanted to address the nationality part, the who are we part, the identity crisis that we've been going through. Because that's why everyone is separated. If you really look at the separation in the U.S., in the diaspora, everyone claims to be this people, that people, this, and none of us can come together. You can't come under one umbrella because you got Farrakhan, who's teaching Scientology now, that's bringing people still under the nation, but they haven't advanced since the Honorable Elijah Muhammad transitioned to a high life. The Noble Drew Ali, the Moorish brothers, they argue and they have issues. They're labeled as a gang. They have what you call paper terrorism, tying up the courts because they think they're above the law because the Arabs made them think they have immunity in the land. They got some type of treaty. They don't know diplomatic law. They don't know their own history. The Hebrew Israelites got our people standing on a corner holding a Bible that they're not reading in Hebrew. They don't know the language. And the Hebrew Israelites was created by a group of 2 Christian pastors out of Tennessee. That's why they accept Jesus of the 2,000 years ago, when most of the Judaic doctrines, they don't accept the Jesus of 2,000 years ago, because their Talmud says that if a man comes and says he's God, he's a liar. So no Jews accepted Jesus. That's why the Jews don't accept Hebrew Israelites, because the Hebrew Israelites were created by a group of Christians. Ask them who started their congregation. They'll tell you if they're honest. So they don't have a nationality. They can't guide you because they're under a Christian church doctrine, and they combine their doctrine to make it to cater to the Christian groups. That's what happened. And so they're all confused. You never hear ancient Jews arguing or trying to have a discussion about the New Testament. No Jews defend the New Testament. Only Hebrew Israelites try to defend the New Testament and speak about Paul and defend Paul, who was a Pharisee and was a mulatto, right? And wasn't of the tribe of Judah that they claim. So why you got Hebrew Israelites trying to defend the New Testament when none of the Judaic doctrine teaches or accepts that doctrine of Jesus being God? But they teaching it now. Why? Because a guy named Frank Cherry and William Crowdy. Look it up. The Hebrew Israelites don't want to tell people that. They don't want to tell they were founded by Christians. They want to beat Christians up. Now, you can find that William Crowdy founded the Church of God and the Saints of Christ in the year 1896. And you'll find this in John Hutchison's book, Antiquity and Social Reform, Religious Experience in the Unification Church, Feminist Wicca, and the Nation of Yahweh. And you'll also find it in Stepping into Zionism by Hazad Harishan, Black Jews and the Remaking of Jewish Identity by Janice Fairheimer, 2014. On page 10, you'll find the history of the Hebrew Israelites. Frank Cherry taught that the Talmud was authoritative, that Jesus would return in the year 2000, and he did not, and in a square earth surrounded by their layers of heaven. He taught that playing the piano and the collection of tithes was forbidden. Eastward direction of prayer, he taught, and the degeneration of the white Jews as interlopers and frauds, and vilified them for denying the divinity of Jesus. This is where the Hebrew Israelites' whole doctrine came from. These two guys, and they combine that's why they preach and talk the way that they do, because their preachers do it in their church that founded them. That's why they're in the corner and they say, read. And the guy comes in and he reads a quote and he does, you know what I'm saying? He does the same thing the pastor does. They can't tell you where your nation is. Their Yahweh didn't even allow them to have a land. Their Yahweh brought people and tribes against them to destroy them as a punishment. In 2 Kings, their Yahweh, Lord, wiped them out of their sight. And he didn't even accept the Israelites no more for the things that they were doing. So he wiped them out of his own sight and didn't accept them as his own people. So they can't tell you or direct you. They're always promising when David comes back to the throne. There's no proof of a David. There's no historical archaeological findings of a David in the Middle East, in Jerusalem. They found 3 steps, and they found one stele that said Beit Dawid, and they say, oh, it's talking about David. Dawid means beloved. So if he says house of the beloved, it's not necessarily talking about the character that you read in Solomon or the book of Psalms. There's no proof, no DNA, no archaeological findings, no bones. You have nothing from these so-called people of God that you claim you want people to acknowledge and live their whole life by. And you can't bring me a bone. You can't find a grave site. You can't find a piece of cloth, a whole king, 2 kings, successorship, down all of the Jerusalem and Judea. You can't find nothing that shows that they existed. Not a piece of pottery, not a spoon, not a cloth, not a crown, not a fingernail, not a toenail, not nothing. What happened to the tombstones? Royalty was buried in particular, what do you call those grave sites that are virtually, they're like basically tombs, right? Royal tombs. Why they're not buried in royal tombs if they're receiving the words of God? Why you can't find Moses' body? Well, all of these individuals, you keep the Bible. You said the Bible was intact. The Bible has the words of God. The Bible was kept pure. The translators kept it in place, but you can't keep the bodies of the individuals. Which is more important, the words or the individuals, to show we did it? The Egyptians kept the bodies, the DNA. You go still find the mummies of our descendants down from each dynasty to each dynasty, and you still uncovering artifacts today. You still uncovering tombs today. You still uncovering archaeological findings, stealing our ancestors and putting them in your museums to show the world, but you don't have a biblical museum to show the linen of this so-called David, to show Solomon, to show Ezekiel, to show Obadiah, to show Jeremiah. None of them. Nobody, nothing, nowhere. And you expect us to keep following these mythological books and texts and gods and beings that you can't prove and lead us down a road to damnation. We're tired of that. Stop lying to my people. And I'm telling you, share this to these Hebrew Israelites, send it to the Moors, to Tariq el-Bays, tell them it's time that the Son of the Father is here. We're teaching actual facts, and our people will be liberated, and you need to get on board before it's too late. And I'm done with that. It's more that I have to say, but I'll cover it in part two, because I know you have questions. Now, let me get to some of the questions there. I've been going on for about we've been going about two hours now. So if some questions that people had, just put them in the chat if you need to. And so again, if you want to be just a supporter, you could be a top fan and join. It's a $2 Now what happens is, what I'm going to do, what I'm going to do is this. We're going to create a database for those that are interested, right? And more information about the nation, right? And what we're doing, who our president is. You can get a lot of that in the actual facts. Like I said, email me. People have been emailing me. There's over 500 books. I sent the book list out. That's available. I'll show you where to get them. There's bookstores available. Yes, you can be. Yes, you can really apply to be a full member of the nation. How? I can't send everyone to my email because it's almost filled up now. I got to get some more storage. So we're going to have that in place. I'm just preparing you all for this, right? For the great gathering, the coming together, so you all can be a part of the freedom of our Father, because people want to help free Dr. Malachi York, right? And so we're going to just launch the campaign. So just be on the lookout for the campaign. It's going to be a global campaign. No one and nowhere will be able to stop you from exercising your free will. I just ran through all the rights there for you. All right. I laid out the laws there, international laws for you to do. So if you want to help and you want to help free him, all you have to do is vote. I'm telling you. I have 5 examples of where people voted and got their president out. The one that they wanted over them. We don't need permission from anybody. There's no time for asking permission. There's no time for looking for a request. They're not qualified to give you anything. They have their own things. They have their own things they're dealing with, right? So they can't help you. Their judgment is upon them. So they're running for their life, right? So, okay, that's fine. Already did it on the website. What website? I don't know what website you're talking about up here. Let me know what website you're talking about. You're talking about the older website. This is going to be totally new, because this is something new that for this new vote, and it has to be done. I don't know what you mean website, so I'm confused. So we could discuss it later. I don't know what you're saying. This is a new website and a new system that's going to be put in place. You'll get more details about it later. I'm just preparing the minds and people to be ready for it. Any questions? I think we're clear on who we are, right? This lecture, I think we're very clear on that. That you're not where you are. It's the mind that you adopt, the state of mind. So you have to get in a state of mind of reasoning. That's it. Once you connect with your reasoning, which is your divine self, don't think reasoning. If it doesn't make sense, it has to make sense. Reasoning leads to facts, confirmation, experimentation, right? Demonstrations. These are factual processes. These are exercises to lead to facts. So when you are able to use your reasoning mind, not believing, if you're a believer, then you're going to keep believing. Believers right now, right? I'll definitely share the link. We have some time. It's going to launch next year, top of the year Earth block. So we're going to campaign for about a year to go, right? We're going to campaign for about a year, and then we're going to have a 3-day vote, global vote. We're not asking permission. I don't need to ask permission to free my people. I don't need that. I don't need to ask permission to free my father. I don't need no one's permission. I don't need no one's to say, okay, Deuce, why you can do that. No, I'm telling you, this is what's going to be done. Okay. That's good. And you vote for someone that you really, that's great. So just prepare. It's now or never. That's the slogan. Now or never. That's the vote. So we're going to do that. I just gave you my thoughts on Tariq Bey. They have opportunities. I mean, they want a dialogue. We can, but they're misleading our people, and they're just hustling people for this so-called sovereignty, and they don't have a nation, established nation, not an international law. There's a website in the U.S. where you could vote. I need to find it again. Vote for who? No, not for Dr. Malachi York. I'm just talking about everybody should have one of those blue, if you don't mind, if to show you just support to make sure that we continue. It's going to move forward. But grab one of those blue stars, right? That would be great for people to show that you are a supporter of the Nubian nation, the Nuwaupian nation. You are a supporter of the father, our president, His Excellency, Dr. Malachi Z.K. York, right? I'm known as Hawkeye. Hawkeye is a name given to me. It's one of my indigenous names. It was given to me by the father. There's 2 mounds that we built in 1045. He gave the date, 1045 AD. Rock Hawk Mound and Rock Eagle Mound is right there in what do you call Georgia, Putnam County. Appreciate you. Any questions? I can go over some questions. So look up Rock Hawk Mound, Rock Eagle Mound. That's why I'm well aware of the land. That was my job, to get our land back, to make sure I found out who was responsible for defrauding us, where it all started, who got jurisdiction, and who made claims against us and placed us in bondage, where you feel like they have a right to pull you over. They have a right to bring you into their jails, a right to bring you into their courts. They don't even have a right to do it. We just allow them to do it, and we don't challenge their rights and our rights. They don't have rights to do that. So you challenge jurisdiction, which is another conversation. But I don't want to get anyone in trouble if y'all start not showing up for court. You got a ticket, or you don't get pulled over, and you try to call me. I'm not in a position to help, but I'm just saying the direction as a whole, we have to free ourselves in that way, where we have our president amongst us. What's happening with the digital ads and Agenda 2030? From now 2027, from 2027 going, there's going to be massive amount. There's going to be a lot of destruction. You're going to see Babylon fall. And I'm just giving you all a warning to prepare that things are not going to get better for them. I'm not talking about you all. I'm saying for them. You're on the right side. As long as you get on the right side, you give them back their religious doctrines. You give them back their Islam. You give them back their Christianity. You give them back their gods. Stop worshiping their gods. Stop worshiping their idols. Stop worshiping their image. Stop being associated with them, and focus on doing things, living of, for, and by each other. I will give you the link. I see the link. Send the link. So it will be done. Don't worry. It's no rush. We're going to do it within the next few months. I'm organizing everything from this end. The head convention. What head convention? There's several head conventions. A head convention is many. Tie-in. I just went through that. Hey, Dewana, wasn't you on? Didn't you hear me express that the international law aspect? That's how those conventions tie in. Yeah, so that's where we are. Which one are you talking about? I can engage with you all a little bit on this. We need to interact with like-minded people. You are throughout the world. You are. That's why I'm saying you bring them here. Bring them to the channel. Let them describe, right? Let them subscribe, and so they can get the information. Check out other episodes, episode 1, episode 2, episode 3, episode 4. This is episode 6. I hope you're enjoying the other episodes. I appreciate you all tuning in. I try to engage in all the comments. Sometimes I can't comment to everybody or answer everybody, but this is what I do. I don't do anything else. I'm literally working for our nation. I'm working for our Father. I'm working for us, for our freedom. I'm digesting the legal arena. So when it's time for us to make sure that when we step forward, when we stand up, everything will be intact. Our Father will be home. He'll walk out and we can claim what's ours and we can live for and by each other. He'll be vindicated. I think the next, we can do a part 2, but if y'all clear on everything was not necessary, there's some other other lectures I would like to do. Again, we're going to do one on the Father completely, on who he is. We also have the feminine one coming, right? Is the nation working with Haldin? I don't know what that word is. Oh, is that Hawaii? That's my brother from Hawaii, right? Well, we work with anybody that's willing to be part of what we're doing. We work with anyone that's willing to stand as one. That's the thing. We're not with the separation. We can work with anybody that's saying we're one people, because that's the only way that we're going to make it happen. If we create some more divisions amongst us, they're banking on it. They like the division. They don't mind us being divided. They don't mind a Black Lives Matter. They don't mind a Nation of Islam. They don't mind the Hebrew Israelites over. They don't mind They don't mind that. But then when they see us linking mind to mind, where we connect powerful right now after this podcast, after this lecture, where we have this same thinking, and that power grows to where everyone is one, and they look up and they're like, who is these? Who are these people? What nation is this? And we say, yeah, we coming to get our president. We have your president, right? These are the violations. These are the injuries you've committed against us, right? I think. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Well, people may not know. That's fine. We're going to stay connected. Salute from England. Salute, Saga. I appreciate you all in the chat. For those that, make sure you like it. We should have a few hundred likes. There's a lot of people that are tuning into these to our podcast. Like I told you, it's the fastest growing in the world, literally from the analytics. That's what I'm talking about. And so we want to make it grow. When you see these other channels, they're not really talking about anything. So it's important. You have to help grow us, and you have a responsibility now to make sure the actual facts get to the people that you know. And before you know it, by June 26th of next year, we'll have 144,000. That's the goal. You are the 144,000. You are that select few. You are the people that the Father wants to reach globally to come under one umbrella so he can save our souls, our minds, and our bodies from this hell that we've been placed in. And it's easy to do. As you see, you can feel it. You can feel the lift. You can feel the mind open up. You can feel the freedom as we have more and more have these discussions. I hope you feel it. So I'm just willing to be a vessel to continue to work and let you know that this is my job. I don't do anything else. I don't have a really outside job. I work for, of, and by us. I work for our Father, the Father in flesh, the Heavenly One incarnated, His Excellency, and He will be home. And He's coming out big. He's not coming out like some victim. He's not coming out like, they let him out. He's not guilty. I think I'll do a conspiracy lecture too to address the case. A lot of people will have questions about the case. I got some emails about the so-called guilty plea, his torture, the trial, the transcripts, the so-called alleged. I got all of that. I've done hours and hours of debates on Clubhouse and other platforms where I stood my ground against 200 or 300 people coming in and out trying to question, and they really can't deal with these facts. I'm not the one to play with when it comes to our Father. You can talk that talk and say what you want to say, but when the facts prevail, that's what we're bringing. That's why we have this actual facts podcast, because everything that's needed to defend, we have it. I was there in court. I lived on the land. My monument was the obelisk. I built that with my own hands. That's the people want to know, hey, who built that obelisk, the Ben or Cleopatra's Needle? I built that with my own hands. That was my monument. My father told me, he said, you're going to do that. And I was surprised because I didn't have a lot of skills in construction. and I actually built it. It's 45. I can give you the measurements and everything. 45 feet high. It has an it has a door and steps that goes on the inside. It was actually a security post when you see the obelisk on Tamaray, for those that don't know about it. So it's a lot of information that people, if you want, we're gonna have these lectures like I said, every 9 days. And so it's nothing that you're going to be able to access or information in these podcasts we're going to present that can't be proven. So I think that is enough. Any other questions? Any questions? 2:30. It's been going on 2 hours and 30 minutes. Man, I enjoy this. I live to speak to you all, and we're going to have some guests coming soon. So I think that might be it. And make sure you share. If you haven't, like, comment, let me know what you think. Any suggestions, lecture suggestions. You can keep your questions coming. It's a lot of Anunnaki questions, a lot of questions about our overseers. We're going to cover it all. I'm just one person. I'm trying to do my best. So I think I will cover as much as I can and make sure that we get these actual facts and we continue to grow. Okay. So until next time, November 9th, tune in, comment and share, and check out the previous episodes for those that are just tuning in. Thank you all. I love you all. Appreciate you all. Wadu.